Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Catherine Lofthouse. I work at Essence. I'm the Programmatic Account Director for Google's brand spend in EMEA, and it gives me great pleasure to be here today with this fantastic bunch of people. We're going to be discussing programmatic in a post-cookie era, and hopefully it's been quite transparent so far that this is a really fundamental topic, a really broad topic, and should give us plenty to get our teeth into. So, Lisa, maybe if you'd like to start by introducing yourself, a bit about what you do, and then we'll work along the row.
So I'm Lisa Kaluzhny. I run demand for EMEA at Pubmatic, which is an SSP, and I moved over to this market about 3 years ago from our New York office.
Hey, so I'm Tej. I'm VP of Group Development across Publicis Media. I work for Precision, which is our programmatic consultancy across our brands and advertisers.
I'm Sarah Vincent. I am Head of Strategic Partner Development at Index Exchange, which is an SSP, and I look after the international region for the business.
Hi, my name's Matt Benathan. I work for Oracle Data Crowd, and I look after our channel partnerships, our platform relationships in EMEA, LATAM, and JPAC.
Hi, my name's Takara Baker, and I work for Adobe's Advertising Cloud product, leading product marketing across Europe. And I moved here about 4 years ago from California.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, everyone. First, I just want to set the scene. Like many topics under programmatic, this is a very broad one. So I just want to open by asking, what do we mean when we talk about the post-cookie era? So I think maybe, Lisa, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I think that there's a number of things that are obviously the post-cookie era, shutting off ITP, everything that Safari has done previously, that Chrome is starting to do, and Firefox has done as well, of just shutting down the cookie and understanding what will be next. How will advertisers be able to run targeted campaigns? What does that audience targeting look like? And how do we help programmatic survive within that?
Yeah, great. And Tej, obviously, from a buy side, your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think first and foremost, we need to clarify it's a third-party cookie and not first-party, which is super important. I think there's been a cat and mouse game between vendors and browsers. You know, we started with 2 years ago with 0.1 or 1 for in-touch tracking, and now we're up to 2.3, where it's now stopping link declaration, and we're thinking about link attribution, all these sort of things with Safari. To Lisa's point, we've seen it with Firefox. Chrome is kind of sitting on the edge, kind of same site, looking at the context of where the cookie sits. So they're kind of playing the middle ground. But obviously, this has all been led by the consumers. Consumer privacy has been the overarching topic here.
Yeah, definitely. And Takara as well. I think you guys had definitely some input because there's, like we said, browser considerations. There's considerations about consent. So there's a lot going on here. What's your input into that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that have happened in the last couple of years that have brought this topic to the forefront. So there's all the changes that are happening within browsers. There's the rise of mobile, and just the fact that third-party cookies or cookies don't necessarily work on mobile devices. And there's just this shift that we're seeing on the Adobe side where advertisers and brands are focused on customer experience management that sits outside of just, advertising. So it's really a focus on how do we evolve with the changes in technology and the changes in platforms to really understand the journey of the consumer.
Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of a brief overview. We've thought quite generally about it, but what have these changes meant in reality so far for the industry, and what's been implemented? Because, we've talked a lot about theory, but let's put this into reality. What's it coming down to, in the day-to-day when we look at our media plans? Takara, do you want to take that one again?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is just people are starting to think about, how can I stitch together disparate pieces of data? What are those technology solutions that are available for me to, understand what's happening across device, what's happening cross channel, and really link all of that together. On our end, from a technology standpoint, we have been just digging into how do we ensure consumer privacy along with that ability to track the journey and allowing the ability to ingest many different data points and data sets.
Yeah, very much like a balance to be struck there. So yeah, Matt as well, I guess from you guys, a lot of infrastructure to consider.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, and the feedback that we've had from advertisers and brands and agencies, of course, working in this space is that we need to put the consumer first, and that consumer, normally a customer, in fact, and their experience and their journey is paramount. And we're always going to be faced with technological challenges as to how we can deliver an outstanding, a delightful consumer journey at the same time as respecting privacy. And of course, privacy considerations and data protection and so on has changed very fundamentally in Europe quite recently. But if we can take that customer, that consumer journey from first-party data assets and provide our clients with technology to help them do that, we're starting to overlap that first-party data with contextual services and understand the contextual environment within which those customers are, or those consumers are browsing, or whatever they may be doing. And then, of course, connecting devices as well, really important point. And measuring outcomes. That's the final piece of the jigsaw as we see it, because we still have a huge amount of demand from our brands to prove our worth. And I think we should all be mindful of that in this industry.
Brilliant. So I guess, Tej, how's that embodying itself from a buying perspective?
I think Matt hit all the right points. I think we're seeing a continuous surgence between the MarTech and AdTech landscapes merging together around first-party data, the growth of CDPs. You know, we're not super worried about the decline of the third party. There's so many different strategies in play. You know, from an agency perspective, we're looking at different strategies for different browsers, how we push it to in-app, how we look at contextual modeling. First party being a big one. We're also looking at how we can take our advertisers' audiences and see publisher audiences and how we can marry those sets together as well. So there's so many different approaches that we can take, but CDPs, first party, are fundamental to a lot of this.
If I'll just add to that, more from the publisher side, that a blocking of third-party cookies represents like a fundamental change to the industry. It's a seismic shift. We've seen, as we mentioned, Firefox now blocking third parties in markets where we had higher Firefox adoption than we do in the UK, for example, Germany. It's been massively impactful for publisher revenue. Like I think the bid rates have dropped by about 40% on those publishers, and some are seeing upwards of 40% revenue drop as well. So we're talking about markets that are dependent on browsers where, you know, the browser then makes a change. It's massively impactful on the business. There needs to be an alternative. And this might sound a bit alarmist because it is, I think, that publishers, brands, we need to be looking at how we can move away from the reliance of the cookie, be less at the liberty of these browser changes and technology changes, and actually start building a system that's based on something that's robust and much more scalable than the cookie ever was. In the short term, this is challenging. It's, you know, maybe we see a redistribution of fund revenue going into contextual, as you've mentioned, potentially maybe more programmatic guarantee. But in the long term, we should be working towards a more authenticated web. So logged in users, a trusted environment, making the open web as bringing that to a parity with the walled gardens. And that's based again on the user trust. They need to know that their privacy data is going to be used in the right way, and that's essentially an amazing foundation to build on from here.
Brilliant. Yeah, so a lot going on there. Oh, sure.
Sorry,
no, yeah, jump in.
Sorry, Catherine. I was just going to say, I don't actually, I disagree that the cookie will ever die. I think it's just going to emerge in a different way. I was reading an article yesterday where the title was like post-cookie era, the show will go on. So I think it's just a matter of looking at how we as consumers, not people in the ad tech industry, view the cookie and the value exchange that we have for it, and whether it's helping publishers figure out a solution utilizing their first-party data, helping advertisers the same way, because we all sit on so much data. So how do we actually use that in a productive way and keep it in a structure that is GDPR compliant, CCPA compliant, brand safe, and gives that consumer the value exchange?
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, huge, topics that you've touched on, which really amalgamate to make this whole theme. What I would like to talk about, you mentioned there, the show will go on. It will, but it will go on with a workaround, right? Whatever form that may take, and we've touched on a few of those already with contextual, with PG buying, with another form of identifier, right? So I guess I want to also touch back on your point, Sarah. You said you feel like there's going to be a big drop, there's a big change. are we ready for it? Are we ready for it right now? Or is it going to hit us as an industry maybe a bit harder than we expected? And what can we do proactively as an industry to make sure that when that change does come, we can work effectively and seamlessly to transition through it, to keep the show going on?
Yeah, I mean, the change has happened already with respect of those browsers. As we mentioned, Chrome, I don't think is going to be changing that anytime soon. But it's just a fundamental mind shift of let's not be reliant so much on the third-party cookie. There are alternatives. Let's look at them. And it's not, I think the time of thinking has kind of gone. It should be now more acting on that and trying to find the alternative. So some publishers now, proactive, forward-thinking publishers, are already thinking how they can create a value exchange with their user and start building up their first-party data. Because, as I said, that will bring them up to parity with the walled gardens. It will unlock a budget that they currently don't see. As it is, if no changes are made, then that we will just continue to see the flow of spend move across to the walled gardens, which isn't great for the open web, isn't great for, amazingly content sites.
Yeah, it's spot on. I think, we might actually arrive at a point, one of the preferable outcomes of GDPR, whereby it's a two-sided coin, because the walled gardens have got stronger as a result of some of this, but also there's a great opportunity for high-quality content to become more valuable and to be rewarded with increased ad revenue and a better consumer experience. That opportunity exists, and actually it has nothing to do necessarily with a cookie. That's the mechanism we've all been using and we're all familiar with. Chromageddon may or may not be round the corner. I think it will be a fairly gradual decline. They've made it pretty clear as of last Thursday that first-party use cases are still going to be very much included within that. Third-party use cases and the lack of transparency around, everyone's very familiar with that point and what consumers think about it and what regulators are doing with it. But I'm sincerely hopeful that we all have an opportunity to shift things back towards good quality on the sales side, on the publisher side, and reward that quality accordingly.
Yeah, so I guess obviously, like you say, quality is intrinsically important to what we do because it brings value. So how do we safeguard that value, and how do we make sure that, thinking about these value exchanges that we have and the way that they're changing, how do we ensure that the right permission and the right relationship are built with the customer moving forward?
I think it's about education. So I think all consumers who within Europe know what GDPR is because they've all gone to a website and they've all had to accept consent. And most people do it because they can't be bothered to figure out how to not allow consent. And all the CMPs have made it rather challenging, which has caused a conundrum amongst itself. So to educate somebody is to be able to explain it to them in a language that they understand and without making it really complex. And I think as ad tech companies, we all know how to make things really complex and use acronyms and words that are just completely irrelevant to consumers, but to be able to translate it to a language they understand, and I think go back to that value exchange, will allow for a much more trust, which is all I think what it goes down to.
Yeah, definitely. Trust, again, being at the heart of how people interact with advertising, right? Without trust, you can't build brands. So it'd be really interesting to hear from like a media planning perspective.
I think I'd like to go back to the previous question. I think there's a couple of points that we need to highlight there, especially when we talk about browsers and OS, and we can't be held hostage to those IDs because they can change a flick of a button. And who's stopping Apple, who's the most consumer-centric brand, has no skin in the game, turning off IDFA tomorrow morning? Nothing stops them. So definitely agree that we need to come around and rally around a more robust solution. First and foremost, on the last point, to your point around cookies will, in third parties, will disappear. There is no question about that. I think we actually want them as an industry to disappear. We want to clean this industry up. We want to make it simple. We've overcomplicated it from a technology perspective. I think value exchange comes down to, from a publisher perspective, and our perspective, is UI. I think when you look at consent management platforms, the user experience, how they've been pushed onto publisher interfaces is difficult. A user hasn't even figured out if this publisher's content is right for them, if it has any value for them, yet they they're presented with this CMP, I think we're seeing a lot of publisher consortiums coming together. Ozone being one, for example. I think they need to come together and have a UI where if you opt into one, you opt into all of them, and you can have that ID. Because I think the user experience is totally bad, like from my perspective, just speaking as a consumer. So I think we do have pieces that we need to put together, and we need to bring the industry together, especially in the 20% that we work in, as opposed to the 80%, which we all know where it's going. So we have a responsibility to come together and give our brands better user experiences to the consumers when they resonate with their messaging.
There's a value exchange here for consumers, and you know, I'm hesitant about the idea of little micropayments and making people pay for content in slightly different ways, or perhaps it gets very dangerous, I think, when you're incentivizing consumers or users to make certain decisions about viewing content. I mean, that reminds me of incentivized lead gen about 20 years ago, and that was rubbish then. So we shouldn't do that again. But also, there is a value exchange for advertisers here as well, and this is a deal between consumers and advertisers. The consumers get value from the content, the advertisers get value from the advertising, and therefore the internet is free. That's it. And therefore, what we need to do is make sure that we're measuring the outcomes for advertisers effectively, that we're ensuring that advertising is viewable, it's free from invalid traffic and bots, that attention and engagement metrics are where we want them to be. And again, if you're connecting the dots back to first-party to consumer data, you're measuring the outcomes from a return on investment and sales uplift perspective as well. So that value exchange is both ways.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's really important, right? On the advertising end, it's creating that value exchange with the consumer. But also, I think one thing that also becomes important is just respecting and understanding how you're going to use that data and how you're going to message customers. And so ensuring that sort of, one, there's the relevancy, there's the non-annoyance, there's the creepy factor that's happening, and really thinking through, especially as we are just looking at how we understand offline to online purchase, how we connect MarTech and AdTech, how we understand when we need to cross-sell, upsell from an advertising end, even knowing when we shouldn't even be serving those ads, or really respecting just the role of the customer. I think GDPR is an interesting one, and we've done a lot of looked at just what are the customer or consumer perceptions to that today, and in some ways, I think we do need to be very clear in the messaging to consumers, because it's turning into that sort of terms and agreement sheet that you get when you buy something that you kind of like throw away. People are just like, okay. And so it's very clear today that we do need to be, very descriptive and clear to consumers about what we're doing with data, how it's going to be used before they can, opt into that.
I disagree on your concept of incentivization, because I think that if I enter my email address and then I get 10% off on a product that I might have already been looking at, the brand is happy because now they have my contact information. I'm happy because I was already going to buy something. Again, I think something like rewarded video, where you watch a video and you get an extra life. I think all of those things are very clear to a consumer that there is a value exchange. And I think that plenty of people who are who are setting up ad blockers and are the ones that are questioning our industry would be more willing to provide their data if there was a value exchange, and if they were getting things like share your data, you get tokens to read an article, subscribe to this, you get this. I think that it's all about understanding what the benefit is for consumers.
I mean, I fully agree with you, Lisa, that those publishers need to figure out what that value exchange looks like for their users. So first of all, it's being very clear about how you're going to use that data that they will provide, and which partners you work with, and making sure you are in line with all regulatory requirements. But ultimately, you need to understand your publisher to know what works. And in some cases, it may be more incentivized than others. In others, for publishers, it may be newsletters. Talking about going back 20 years, there's all these different iterations of what a value exchange looks like.
Agreed. I'm just mindful it's a slippery slope, and you've you've called out some extremely solid examples of incentivizing somebody to sign up to email newsletters or whatever, and obviously that's entirely valid. There's a creeping demand for more and more sign-ups to those newsletters or whatever it might be, and therefore the net gets a little bit bigger, and different methods of incentivization may not necessarily produce the genuine sign-ups that you're looking for.
Yeah, it looks very much like success in this space is going to be to do with the architecture and the infrastructure, and as well the collaboration between how all of that data is being pulled in as well. So I think one of our colleagues earlier mentioned some kind of consortium or like unified agnostic space in which to put and house all of that data to make it universally accepted, true, and accessible across the industry. So to that point, how do we put these, again, very theoretical, very top-level concepts into reality? And more pertinently, whose responsibility is that? There are a lot of agents. There are a lot of players. Who's going to, step up to the plate, or who has been stepping up to the plate so far to make something like this a really workable, scalable reality?
So I think last year we were talking about Universal ID as Digitrust really launched. The IAB bought Digitrust. It started launching across Europe. And I think that that was something that it was owned by a third party. So it wasn't like a DSP or just a company that could be bought at any point in time. And it was a trusted opportunity. And then as kind of identity became a hotter topic, more and more companies started popping up. You have specific ones that are regional specific, like NetID in Germany. And then you start looking at, okay, fine. So we're going from millions upon billions of different like IDs to then having what, like 10, 20, like where is that going to stop? And I think that the IAB has a great opportunity with Digitrust to try to really take on that market share and be that third party.
I think you're right. I think from a technology perspective, I think there's ID is an opportunity for growth, and technology vendors want to get to it. But what we've actually done is we've created our own lunarscape of IDs and confused the whole market around which one is right, which one isn't. None of them are proven. From our perspective, we're very agnostic with technology. We test them. There's still no scale to some of them. Yeah. They're not proven in the sense they're not flexible. Like a lot of them are using it through appending it onto first party, which is fine, like ID5, for example, and you got your consortiums that you mentioned, LiveRamp today as well. So from our perspective, it's important we come together, because all we're doing is actually causing confusion and actually just sending money towards the walled gardens. And, we need to play game with the ID space. And to your point earlier, I agree, it needs to be independent. It needs to be run by a trusted body. Don't know who that is right now, as in who's got the legs and who's got the technology, who's got the scale. I think it's too early to call that. I think next year will be a lot of testing, a lot of robust testing from our perspective anyway with our clients. We're already testing a few right now, but we're not there yet. And I don't think anyone is. So that's where the reality is.
I think that's like a really good point, that it's difficult to say it's the one body's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. It's the whole industry, and there isn't one tried and tested option right now that is going to fit everybody. So it is a bit of trial and error, but we need to have a willingness to make those steps towards trialing, and obviously erroring, if that's the word.
It can be.
Yeah, for now it is. But I also read an article about American Express that were trying to run campaigns that were not based on third-party cookies, therefore going out there and looking how they can access inventory, how they can utilize the data they have against what the data the publishers have. And I think the result of that is really they're saying that, we just need to work with a publisher where the technology works and it all kind of fits together. And that doesn't mean it's every single publisher that will work for them. So at least there are steps being made, though, and brands are looking to trial that.
Yeah, just because there's, I guess, to your point, a lot of fragmentation, a lot of options out there. Maybe don't consider them all. Maybe consider fewer and stick with what you know. And, if that is success for your business and your brand, then fantastic. On top of that, I guess a point again for you, Tej. Do you think that our partners, our brands, do you think they really have a deep understanding of this when we talk to them about buying their media on a more day-to-day basis, and do you think that they understand the implications of moving forward into this cookieless world? Honestly, no.
Being very transparent, I think it's our job to educate them and to make it simple. I think we're trying to figure it out ourselves right now. I think every single entity is trying to figure it out. So our job going back to Lisa's point, it's all around education. Education is key here to understanding actually if we use your first-party data, what we could actually do. In fact, I think I'm actually quite optimistic about next year because I think we're cleaning up this space. I think we're going to have better quality opted-in users who want to be advertised as opposed to mass who don't really want to be targeted, and a lot of wastage in that space. You can have all the brand safety you want in the world, but really the reality is you're probably wasting some of it. So I'm quite optimistic in that sense. So we're educating our clients on a day-to-day basis. Some of them are hearing a lot of press news and they want to know certain vendors, so we're reviewing them. We run a verified program, which is very much a tried and tested. We run every single vendor through their paces, and that's what we're doing with certain clients who will bring certain vendors to the table. And likewise, we will reach out to certain vendors and test it. But it's all around education right now for us.
Yeah, brilliant. So it looks like we've got a lot of opportunity in the space, a lot of innovation going on. It's looking like there are potential wins with PG, contextual buying. We talked about token systems as well. So I guess as a closing and quite broad question to you all, we'll see where we go with that. What do you think is going to come out on top as the sort of premier solution to this? A long and a short-term view would be great to see as well. And why? Takora, should we start?
Yeah, sure. I think so. In the short term, and this is a conversation we're having with a lot of our customers. A lot of people are looking towards kind of what's the universal ID solution that we can look at, and who can we partner with to start to just identify what's happening within digital. That's a small piece of really kind of managing this and mitigating what we're seeing with the decline of the cookie. And so we're really focused for us personally, because we know there are so many different solutions. There's so many different areas that we need to stitch together. What are those data platforms that can really allow that capability, but also make it simple for people to use, that are compliant for people, and really allow the ability to share across your various partners within your ecosystem?
We want to be measuring outcomes in brand suitable environments, your first party data in brand suitable environments, and measuring outcomes of that. That's what we'll be doing next year.
I think anyone who adopts the people first identity approach to marketing will come out on top. But that is it. Steps are being taken now, but it's probably more of a medium term reality. We at Index have done some people-based marketing with Merkle in the US, so that has been a bit more sort of buy-side led actually. But it's proof of concept, it works. So we'll see more and more rollout of that. But essentially, those that come out on top should be the open web.
Yeah, I think for short term we've got multiple different strategies at play to help our clients. From about contextual modeling, etc. Long term, we're looking at first-party data plays with our enterprise partners as well, and combining that. And obviously, the ICO is going to mix it up again next year, I suppose, as well. And that's going to be interesting. So for us, it's all around innovation, testing, scrutinizing every single ID vendor, and making sure we back the right one. And that might not just be one. To your point, that might be a few. It depends how many bid requests can work, and there's so many different options out there. But I think next year is going to be around a lot of innovation in this space.
I think from a PubMatic standpoint is really helping both publishers and advertisers with their first-party data and understanding what can be done with it. And then from my own personal perspective, I think fingerprinting, is it a friend or is it a foe?
It's a foe.
We don't have time for that, I'm afraid. Brilliant. There's obviously a lot going on in this space, which is breeding so much innovation, so many interesting conversations. So I guess, for Christmas, I'd like a crystal ball to see what comes out on top in future. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. What a fantastic discussion, and thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
Thanks.